يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Let's Talk live from our Sunning Hill studios right here in Johannesburg. It's a Wednesday morning and we do hope that you're going to keep us company right up until 10 o'clock. Now it's Women's Month. Next Wednesday we're going to be enjoying a wonderful public holiday, and we truly would love to say a very big thank you to all the amazing women that has come through the doors of ITV and have added value to all the different topics and discussions we've had on the show. And I guess this is what we're going to be doing in the coming weeks and days as well. And you don't necessarily have to be a high-profile woman for us to commend you, to commend the type of work you do and the way you touch people. Just being you and just making your life and your little world turn over is enough for us, and those are the type of women we love to recognize and commend here at ITV. And in the studio today we kick off the show with two such women, ordinary women, but they have turned and touched lives in a very positive way. We're going to be talking to a mom and a daughter-in-law about their loved one who is now a recovering drug addict, and what is it that made them stay in the relationship. All I can say is unconditional love. But later on in the program, another amazing woman. She used to teach and eventually ran the Apex Muslim School in Auckland Park, and then of course opportunity came knocking on her door. She's now based in Doha and she's at a school there. She'll be coming in to talk to us about education, just how far behind we are here in South Africa, and the important role we as moms and dads can play in the lives of our children. Whether they're receiving a good enough education or not, I think we as parents can and should be making the difference in our children's lives. So all of that and more coming up. We're also waiting for Ziad Dadabai. He's making his way to the studios from Vereniging, but I do know that the traffic is a nightmare this morning, so let's hope and pray, inshallah, he's able to make it on time. But let's join these two amazing women, these women who believe totally in unconditional love, and they are Tracy Ferguson and Julie Alli. Assalamu alaikum, Fawzia.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Morning, Tracy. Welcome to the program.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you on the show. You are the wife of Rafik Ferguson, who was on the show a couple of weeks ago, and I must tell you, he made quite an impact with our viewers. Rafik came into the studio and he opened up his heart to us here at ITV and to our 2 million odd viewers right across the globe, talking about his addiction and his recovery. We have committed here on the show, here at ITV, that we're going to talk long and hard about this terrible scourge that is breaking up families, communities, and society at large. Now, how long were you in? You still are in the relationship
Yes.
with Rafik. How long are you guys married?
We married for 13 years, but we know each other for 17 years.
So you've known him for 17 years. I'm sure you must have known that he was drugging when you got into the relationship.
Look, when my first marriage, I got divorced, and then I started partying. So I met him at a rave, so to say. Mm-hmm. So I was partying with him and whatever. And eventually we decided to get married, and we had Kayla, who's my second daughter, and I stopped partying and he wanted to carry on.
But did you know at the time that he was drugging?
I thought he'd stopped.
Okay.
Really. And
they're very convincing, aren't they, when they want to win you over?
Yes. And he would work and probably do it undercover. I didn't really see it. But then eventually his appearance changed.
How did it change?
He became dark, skinny, everything about him, the lies, you know, his whole character changed.
A lot of people have told me that when you're in active addiction, your complexion changes, you become darker in color and you lose a lot of weight.
Yes.
Do you know the reason for that?
Yes, it's obviously the drugs. It has a bad effect on your body.
Any specific drug, or is it a whole range?
I think it's all drugs that has that effect on you.
And when you saw these physical changes in Rafiq, what did you think, and you know, what was going through your mind?
Look, there came a point where he couldn't hide it anymore. He used to steal things from the house, stay away from the house for weeks on end, and he couldn't keep a job. So I knew what it was. And eventually I kicked him out because I had to look at my kids and see what they were going through. And yeah, I kicked him out, and that was it. And he used to come home, get food, and come and have a bath. But
You allowed him to do that?
I allowed him to come in and have a bath.
Why?
Yes, because I still loved him. I always loved him.
Don't you think
And
that enabled him? Because you gave him the comforts of a bath and a hot
Yes,
meal?
It definitely did. I believe it did. But at the time, I think when you love someone so much, you look past that. It's like you don't see that. You think you're helping them, but you're not, you know.
Were you kind of hoping and praying that he will see how deeply my love runs for him, and he'll see that it is absolutely unconditional, and on that basis he will come back to me and he'll kick the drugs. He will prove to me that he loves me more than he loves the drugs.
Yes. I always thought that love would conquer all, you know, that at some point he would see that his kids loves him, I love him, and, you know, enough is enough. He would stop, he would look at what he's doing to us, but it didn't help. He just got from bad to worse.
What's different now? What changed that you still then eventually took him back? Because I know that you're back together again.
Yes. I wasn't speaking to him for almost a year. And
when you say you weren't speaking to him, what did you just ignore his calls? And
if he'd call me, I put the phone down. If he'd come to the door, the kids would speak to him, I would go inside.
It's very difficult for you, isn't it?
Yes.
Hearing your daughter-in-law talk this way, it pains you a lot.
So much.
And
Tracy?
the last time that he went into a rehab, he did it on my birthday. Because on my birthday, he would always call me or come and see me. And that day, I was wondering, there's no phone call from him, I don't know where he is. And a few weeks down the line, he sent me a message that he's now in a rehab. He sent me a photo of himself. And I still showed it to my daughter, and I said, what does he want from me? Because I'm done with him. I don't want to see him. And he still asked me to bring him some toiletries and all of that. But then I took it. And I seen
Were you
the
pleased
change.
when you heard he checked himself into rehab?
You know what? He's done it so many times before. So it was one of those things. I thought to myself, what's different this time? You know? But when I seen him, I seen a change. I seen a huge change in him. And
What
then
was the change that you saw?
physically, the way he was towards me, it was, I could see my husband, you know? Because when he was on drugs, it wasn't him. I didn't see him.
You saw the man you fell in love with.
Yes, yes,
The clean man,
That's
the
correct.
pure man,
Yes.
the whole man.
that's right.
Fawzia, are you okay to talk?
Yes, I am. It's just very
Rafiq is your nephew, but you
Yes.
said to me that from the time he was a young boy, he lived
Actually
with
from
you.
birth.
From birth.
Yes.
So he's like your child.
My child, yes.
How do you feel hearing Tracy talk about Rafiq and his addiction?
Absolutely.
Alhamdulillah, he's in recovery now.
Yes.
Let's just hasten to add that.
That's
He's
all
been in
we
recovery
can
for
do.
14 months.
Yes.
Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep him on the path of recovery. And I also know that he's working with, he's working in a rehab center trying to reach out and heal other people.
Yes.
When did he's been with you from birth. His
Yes.
mother passed away about 4 years ago. What do you think she would say if she should see him today, to see him in this beautiful, clean state of mind, body and spirit?
She would have been over the moon. And you know, she would always come to me and say, Fawzia, what do you think we should do? I said, you know what? All we can do is turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say thank you and pray. Our du'as were accepted. And we waited for a long time.
Never give up hope.
Never.
Sabr is the key
Sabr
word.
is the key word.
When Rafiq was in active addiction, did you try and talk to him, try and reason with him, try and show him that what he's doing is wrong, he's destroying his mind, his body, his soul? Try and show him that it is completely haram, that he's not only destroying himself, he's destroying the entire family.
The whole family. He's destroyed the whole family. It was impossible to get through to Rafiq. We would try everything and anything. His mother used to talk to him, Rafiq, stop this, you're finishing me up. But it was like, you know, water running from a duck's back. It was, he could just never see what he's been doing to his mother. And she was just sitting and crying at all times. She had to defend whatever he did, you know, because her daughters, they were there and she couldn't have time for them because she had to always spend time with Rafiq. What he was doing, trying to keep him out of harm's way. You know, she would sit and say, I wonder, I'm just waiting for that knock on the door to say, Rafiq, something has happened to Rafiq.
It's very sad. An addict is very much like having a child who has possibly a dreaded disease or a terminal disease, because you focus so much on the addict because you're trying so hard to get him to clean up his act, him or her, that your focus shifts from your other children and you tend to neglect them, and sadly that splits up families as well, doesn't it?
Definitely,
because those children then forever hold it against you because you've neglected them.
Yes. And that was exactly the case. That's how they turned out to be, and said to her, you've got more time for Rafiq, that's never here with us. And they drifted away from her. You know, and this is what everybody that has this problem, you know, goes through the same thing. And it makes the family suffer with the addict.
It breaks up the family.
It breaks up the family.
There's a lot of resentment
So
and
much.
heartache and heartbreak.
So much.
Okay,
So
let's take an
much.
ad break. I'm talking to Julie Alli and Tracy Ferguson, the mother and the wife of Rafiq Ferguson. Alhamdulillah, he was in the studios a couple of weeks ago. He is in recovery. He has been in recovery for the past 14 months. And Alhamdulillah, he's now working with the recovery team in Florida, west of Johannesburg, and he is trying to change other lives by this amazing work he's doing. And as we've said to you a couple of weeks ago, this is going to be an ongoing focus for us here at ITB. We're going to focus on addiction in our community, and we're also going to be focusing on broken relationships, because we know, you and I know, that these are two of the most important and the biggest issues that is burning up this community. So do bear with us, and if you have stories to share with us, we'd love to hear you. First, a short ad break. We're talking to mother and daughter-in-law, Julie Alli and Tracy Ferguson. They're talking about their loved one who's been drugging for, I think they've even lost count of the amount of years, I think 20 odd years. And Alhamdulillah, he is now in recovery. He has been on the road to recovery the past 14 months. And I think more importantly is that he has now joined a rehab group, and he's trying to rehabilitate young people in the community. Now, Tracy, they say it takes a village to raise a child. Sadly, our communities have lost that concept, and I think it's time we get back to that concept, because we need to be supporting and touching lives in a positive way.
That's correct.
When Rafiq was in active addiction, I'm wondering how that impacted on your children, and was there ever a stage or time when they said, they want to cut themselves off their father and have absolutely nothing to do with him?
They never ever said that they wanted nothing to do with him. I actually think if they didn't see him, they would worry. You know, because I always used to say, I probably get a phone call one day that he'll answer he's in jail or he's dead or whatever. So they were more scared that something would happen to him if they didn't see him. So they always wanted to see if he's okay, you know.
I'm wondering about, school children. You know, we know that school children, not necessarily school children, but children can be very, very innocent in their cruelty, not even realizing that they're being cruel. Did other children ever point out to them that your father is a druggie and we don't want to have anything to do with you because we're afraid we might get tainted, and you're not a good person because your father is not a good person?
That actually didn't happen, but what did happen is we got a lot of negativity from my family. And my dad would say to the kids, your father's hopeless, you know. Your mum is working alone. You need to respect her, this, that, and the other. And I always used to say to him, don't blame the kids for what their dad is doing, you know.
Or don't tell them how bad he is or the bad actions he's involved in. Because it must break their poor little hearts, people telling them your father is useless or hopeless. It's very difficult to tell that to a child. In terms of their functionality in the home and in the school, did you notice any differences?
Their marks dropped. Kayla wasn't doing well because her father was everything to her. So he broke her into a million pieces. When he went on the street, he was practically a hobo on the street.
Really?
Yes.
Did you see him on the streets, on the street corners?
We stayed.
What did you do when you saw him in those situations? Ignore him?
Yeah, we stayed in Newcley, and we had a little stoop, like a veranda, where he stayed there, and he'd knock on the window and ask for bread and food and water and whatever, and come around, have a bath. But it was embarrassing for the kids, you know. It was really bad for them that I actually had to take them and move away. I left, I went to Florida, but he found us, you know.
And alhamdulillah, he's a picture of perfect health now.
Yes, he's so amazing. He's the best father and husband I could ask for.
And let's hope and pray that it continues, inshallah. Your advice to women, other women in your situation, what do you believe you can tell them to just hold on to that little bit of hope that they might have?
Never lose hope and pray. Prayer is so important because God does answer prayers. That I know.
Do you believe in the support family, perhaps going to support groups? Do you think that might work for them to give them strength?
Yes, that could work. And also their families should support them because it's not easy going through something like that and still having people tell you of how bad that person is. So if the family also supports them, that's really awesome because it's difficult to go through something like that alone.
Fauzia, when did you first realize that Rafiq was drugging, and how did it impact on your life and your home?
At the age of 17, Rafiq dropped out of school. And, we were battling. Things were not easy because she was a single mother. And that is why I had to take her in. But he was like just very despondent in doing anything. Didn't want to go back to school, didn't want to get a job. And it took a toll on her from that age already. So it was very bad because she had I'm telling you, she had no family support. It was always, he's the bad person, he's the bad person. And that must have
Who was saying these
taken it
things
down.
about him?
My families.
Okay.
It was...
So it was only you that was standing with her?
With her, and that is what she would tell them. If I had better support from my family, because there's no male support, and I would like my family to stand by me. But Rafiq was at that stage that nobody cared about him. You understand? He gave everybody no hope. The things that he did, the way he used to do it, he didn't care about anything or anybody. My family actually they were worried about my sister, not about her child. And she was suffering mostly because she had it coming from Rafiq and her family. So she actually had nobody to turn to.
And how does a mother ever give up on her child? It doesn't matter what he's done, what he's currently doing, or how bleak his future might be looking. I don't think any mother in the world would give up on her child.
They only have hope for the best, don't they?
Absolutely.
They only have hope.
If you had to do things differently now that you both have had the experience of having a loved one that was addicted from a very early stage in his life, what do you believe would be that difference that you would have made?
Oh, there's so much I can think of. Really, spend more time with them. Give them your everything. For them not to go off the road. Just be there for them at all times.
Do you think that perhaps Rafiq went through this journey because back then, 20-odd years ago, there was not enough awareness about drugs and the effects of drugs?
Definitely. It was a definite yes. Because, you know, it was done very underhanded. Nobody knew about it at that stage, like we know now. We know about everything now that's going on. So if we can just face up to it and, you know, help our children.
Tracy, do you believe that if we do ongoing programs through all different media platforms and even in the schools have very aggressive campaigns to talk about drug awareness, that these type of messages would get through to the children and hopefully they won't experiment? Yes,
most definitely. That's what Rafiq is doing at the moment, going to school, speaking to children. And also when kids think they have no one to speak to and they can't go to a specific person, and if he comes in and he can help them, I think they can, you know, there will definitely be a difference. And if more people get involved as well, there will definitely be a difference.
I have no doubt in my mind that you've had very dark days and dark moments in your life with Rafiq, your husband, and his addiction. But what stands out for you where you really believe that this is it? I've had it. I definitely cannot continue with a man like this. He's sucking me dry of every ounce of energy I have.
That's how I felt because I was working at the time and I had stress at work. I would come home, he would stress me out. I couldn't take it anymore. I would cry every night.
Did your work suffer?
No. I kept it. It's only the people that I worked closely with that knew what I was going through. But I didn't tell my manager or anybody else what I was going through. And yeah.
What's the highlight of your life now?
To see my husband, just look at him while he's working, while he's helping people. I sit and I still stare at him and say, God, you did this for me. Thank you, you know. I still stand in awe of his goodness.
Your message, we're going to wrap up in a minute or two, your message to people watching us today, particularly to wives of husbands who are in active addiction.
Pray. Keep praying and never give up hope. And someday, on God's time, He will answer your prayers.
Okay. Fauzia, do you think that if you keep telling the addict, keep reminding them that there is help available, that there are facilities that can help them clean up their act, even though they may get fed up, you say the same thing over and over again on a daily basis, that eventually the message will get through and hopefully they will then reach out for that helpline?
Definitely, because this is what I've been doing with Rafiq. Every minute I see him, I used to tell him, you know, Rafiq, never lose hope. Don't forget about the Almighty. He is there. He will answer. But in your sincerity that you ask Him, it will happen. You know, the last time I saw him was a year ago. And he was in a state. And I said to him, go down here. Go down on your knees and ask. That's all.
And your last piece of advice to moms listening into the...
Never give up. Always pray. And Allah Ta'ala listens to all our prayers.
Thank you for being so brave to come into the studio to talk to us about this scourge that's destroying this society. We do hope and pray, inshallah, that your loved one will never ever go down that slippery slope and he will continue touching other people's lives in a very, very positive way. Allah be with you both and with your family, and particularly with Rafiq. That was the mother and the wife of Rafiq Ferguson. He's in recovery, alhamdulillah, and he is busy helping other people on the road to recovery. And we need to take an ad break. When we get back, we're going to talk to Nadia Mutara about education in South Africa. Welcome back, and now that we've dried up the tears, we're now going to be looking at the changing face of education. And to talk to us about education both locally and globally is Nadia Mutara. She used to teach and then eventually managed the Apex School, Muslim school in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, but she has subsequently taken on a post in Doha. So let's hear what this lady has to tell us about the changing face of education. Assalamu alaikum, Nadia. Welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam, Auntie Julie. It's lovely to be back home and also here with you this morning.
So you're here on the summer vacation, well, the Northern Hemisphere summer vacation, and you've come home to spend some quality time with the family.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, you come from a family, I mean, your dad, Billy Mutara, well known as Billy Mutara, sadly has passed on. But he was in education, and so were some of your siblings.
No. I'm the
Are you the only one?
Yes, I'm the only one who followed in his footsteps here.
Tell us a little bit about your dad, and what was it that motivated you to go into education?
I think besides just being a teacher, he was an amazing human being. A man who instilled a deep sense of value in each of us as siblings, and somebody who led by example. So from a very young age, I've always been inspired to teach, and he's always been there to support me along the way. So yes, even though today, after 32 years of teaching, I still look back at some of the things that he has said about education.
Sorry, did you say you?
Yes, this
32.
is my 32nd year in education.
You don't look a year older than 32 years. Gee whiz, amazing. Okay, so after 32 years of teaching, do you think you would have done anything differently as a teacher? If it was in your power, obviously.
Yes, definitely, I think. Just having had this experience now to move away from the comforts of South Africa, going to a new country, and just seeing how out of touch I've been. While you're in the country, you think that you are in touch and you're doing the best that there is and is comparable to what's going on around the world. But the harsh reality is that we are still very far behind in terms of the way we do things. This move to Doha has been good for me on so many levels, besides just giving me that opportunity to interact and work with teachers from around the world. It has also given me time to reflect on my practice as a teacher. I've had to ask some very, very deep, honest questions to myself. And some of the answers and the realizations I've had have been really profound.
But Nadia, obviously, it's very sad that you're sharing these insights with us, because you've now had a glimpse and you've lived in the real world abroad, and you've made that comparison as to how far behind we are as far as the education system is concerned. But the sad reality is that we are powerless, or are we? Can we make a difference? We are really governed by the school governing bodies, number one, also by the education department and other factors. Would you agree with me or not?
To a certain extent, yes. But one of the realizations I've had is that there's nothing really wrong with the education system. In the South African context, I think what we need to do is differentiate between education and schooling. And when I talk about schooling, I'm looking at the unique context of every school. I think each school has the opportunity to take the system and to realize what they need to do to serve a particular community. What we've been doing for far too long is focusing on academics and not really understanding what the needs of the 21st century world are. The world no longer needs academics. That has shifted. 30 years ago, the most successful people in the world were people with high IQs. Today, the most successful people in the world are people with high EQs and SQs, emotionally intelligent and spiritually intelligent people.
But you know what, Nadia, I think sadly for us in South Africa, we are the victims of apartheid. My generation, you and your generation, and obviously our parents and grandparents. And because we were deprived of a good quality education under the apartheid system, I think we still focus on education being the key. And of course, you are right in saying things have shifted, things have changed. But because of where we come from, we still insist on having a degree, a preferred degree, either a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer, or a teacher, and that makes you a preferred candidate, even in the marriage stakes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you don't have those qualifications, you're not a good enough suitor for my daughter or whatever. So, I think we as parents need to start thinking differently as well. And I think people in authority need to sell this concept to us as parents. And as a community as a whole, it's almost demeaning if you hear that a child is following the route of an artisan. Or some such thing. We truly believe it's demeaning, and yet those are the skills that are so sought after all around the world.
I think absolutely, Auntie Julie. There's a beautiful saying that I read on a minibus taxi, believe it or not, the other day, and it said, if you always think like you always thought, you'll always get what you always got. If you don't like what you are getting, you need to change what you're doing. So we definitely need to have that shift of focus and make children realize that you're not successful only if you're a doctor or a lawyer. You're successful in anything that you do, provided that you do it well, provided that you do it with passion. This opportunity in Doha has exposed me to a whole new way of teaching. And the realization I've had that is particularly at our Islamic schools, we are creating this unrealistic cocoon where we think our children are really safe and they are learning, but when they step into the real world and they're faced with this harsh reality of what life is all about, they find it difficult to cope. If you look at the stats in South Africa, they said, I think I read the other day, 62% of people between the ages of 24 and 34 still either live with their parents or rely heavily on their parents for support. Now that's alarming.
But isn't that, with the Muslim community, isn't it a culture thing, or the Indian community? We don't kick our kids out at the age of 18 and say, go and find your own way in the world.
Yeah, I think they can still live with you, but giving them that sense of independence, getting them to work and earn an income, getting them to make their own choices and their own decisions from a very young age. I've seen this happen in practice in Doha at the school that I'm at, where children as young as 5 are given the opportunity to make their own choices and to make their own decisions and to have opinions about topics. And I realized then that that is something we need to start doing here in South Africa if we want to produce children who are going to be leaders in our communities one day.
Okay, hold that thought. We need to take an ad break. But 2 things that I'd like to explore a little further is giving children the opportunity of making their own choices from the age of 5. I worry about the fact that we're going to raise very precocious children, number one. And the other issue is the Muslim schooling system here in South Africa, the Islamic schooling system. Mm-hmm. What do you believe we should change? But we will respond to that after the ad break. Nadia Mutara is my guest. She used to teach, and she was the principal up until quite recently at the Apex school, Muslim school in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. She has subsequently taken up a post in Doha, and as you can hear, it seems to be an amazing experience, an eye-opener for her, and she's here to share all of those thoughts with us. If you have any questions or comments, please do call us on the open line, but right now we're going to take an ad break. We're talking to Nadia Mutara. We're talking about the changing face of education, not only in South Africa, but all around the world. And I think when we look at the education system in the South African context, the reality is that we are lagging behind. And I think school authorities, the committees, the parent committees, etc., need to wake up to the realization, if we do not start implementing subtle changes, we can start with the small changes. If we do not start doing that, we're really going to be lagging way, way behind, and our children will not be able to compete on the global stage. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think, Auntie Julie, we need to see what is it that the 21st century world demands. We're looking for children or young adults who are able to negotiate, who can mediate, who can solve problems, who can think critically. And the question we need to be asking ourselves is the current system allowing children to develop those skills that they will need later on in their lives?
So let's look at the two questions I put to you before the ad break. Too much choice for a young child, will they not become very precocious?
I think choice within reason. If you look at a typical Islamic home, and I think to an extent Islamic schools, we tend to want to think for our children. So if you go out to a restaurant, for example, you'll find a parent choosing what the child must eat. I mean, that's just a simple example. But just giving kids from a very young age that chance to make their own choices in terms of what they like, when they eat. I know a common thing is, and I've seen mums doing this over and over again, it's lunchtime, you will eat. And the child may not be hungry, but we force that upon them. So it's little things like that, within reason, where you give kids the opportunity to make choices. What happens later on in life, if you don't do this, is that kids become reliant on you as adults, reliant on the adults in their lives right until they become adults. So they always want somebody to be there to make decisions and choices for them in their lives.
And sadly, it seems that some parents love this. It's almost like they're being needed, and the children are so dependent on them, and they like that. They want to be needed. Yeah. They want their children to depend on them. Mm-hmm. Perhaps they have a motive, and it's that they don't want the children to find their wings and fly away.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's that sort of holding on, and
the
control. And a lot of parents live their lives through their children.
True.
It's something that I think we all do very, very often without realizing the detriment that it can actually cause.
We even want our children to fulfill our unfulfilled dreams in terms of career choices and professions. Yeah. Let's look at the issue around, there's a lot of private Muslim schools in South Africa. What would your advice be to them in terms of starting to think very strategically and implement those strategies into the schools?
I think one of the first things we need to do is look at our policies, our school policies. Are they in line with what a 21st century education calls for? Secondly, we need to, and it's a realization that I've had since I've been in Doha, is that it doesn't matter where in the world you teach. It doesn't matter whether you're teaching in a house or in a palatial school. I think what is most important is the culture and the ethos of a school, the kind of parents that enroll their children at the school, and the teachers who are called to serve the school. And also, more importantly, the synergy between the child, the teacher, the home, the school, the board, all these stakeholders working together to providing a holistic education rather than just an academic education.
When we look at the role of the parents, I worry sometimes when I hear stories about how demanding and confrontational parents can get with school authorities and school teachers, if the child doesn't come home with the type of results they're expecting the child to come home with.
Yeah, I think it's the pressure, again, like you were talking about earlier, the pressure of where we come from and the stress on academics and, you know, going to a family dinner on a Sunday and showing the family your child's report. Well, my child's got A's in every subject. But is that so important? What is more important, you know? Today we judged, and it's a sad reality, we judged the kind of person that we are is judged by the kind of religion that we follow or the school that we go to. But in essence,
or the qualification,
that you have.
So, you know, if you have a degree, depending on the type of degree you have, you are more acceptable in society than a person who hasn't possibly got a degree. And yet you're now telling me that that degree probably in the next so many years, apart from a doctor and lawyer, is not going to really hold much value. It's really about the skill sets that you have and you bring to the table.
Absolutely, and who we are is defined by who we are is actually what we contribute to the world.
True.
You know, so yes, it's lovely to have those degrees and those qualifications, but you can be a doctor. But what kind of a doctor are you? You could be a teacher or you could be a lawyer. What kind of a teacher or lawyer are you? You know, at the moment in the world, there's a new buzzword called duty of care. So if I'm a teacher, how am I serving? Is it a passion or is it just a profession? What example am I setting? So again, this whole emphasis on values in education. And what's been very interesting here in Doha is to just see the integration of the Islamic values into the schooling system. Because I'm at an international school, I'm not at an Islamic school per se. So it's a secular school.
For the expats in Doha,
yes,
obviously.
So it's a secular school with an Islamic ethos. So it's been phenomenal to see that it doesn't have to be an Islamic school. You can have Islamic values infused in any system that you
Absolutely,
use.
because it's a way of life, alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Nadia, what would you say to young parents? Obviously, we know that private schooling in South Africa is really very expensive. And unless you are very rich and have a top job yourself, you'd be able to send your child to a very expensive private school. So the result is that you either send your child, if you're a Muslim, to a Muslim private school or to a Model C school, and you're not quite sure, you know, what the end result's going to be. A lot also depends on the type of interaction and the type of education, because education happens in the home as well. What's happening on the home front? What would you advise young parents? What should they start doing? How do they engage with their children? What sort of programs should they engage in with their children to get them school ready and get the most out of their schooling, whether it's a top private school or an ordinary Model C school?
I think you're quite right, Auntie Julie, where you say the home is the first base of education. You know, research shows that children acquire their value system by the age of 5. So what parents should be doing is spending enough quality time with their children when they are really young, so that the foundation and the roots and the values are very, very strongly embedded within the child. And then actually setting an example, because, you know, today nothing is taught, everything is caught. And
explain that.
Our actions as adults and teachers impact more on children than through what we say.
So learn by example.
So learn by example. So if you're saying to your child, be honest, or it's important to be honest or not to fight, am I fighting or am I being dishonest? Because the child's behavior is basically a reflection of what they see in the adults around them. So to set a good example, to spend lots of quality time, because if the roots and the foundation is strong, it doesn't matter which school the child goes to. The child carries those values with him or her wherever they go.
Do you believe there's too much interference by parents with the teachers and schooling system? Because the children don't, and I think I have asked you this question before, children don't come home with the desired results?
I think absolutely. I think there's often a clash of roles where parents don't really understand their role as a parent. Another thing is where
And of course, I'm referring also directly parents interfering and also school governing bodies.
Yes, I think the separation of roles and responsibilities is absolutely important. All stakeholders need to know that it's imperative for them to work together. So if there's inconsistency amongst the parent, what the parent wants and what the school is offering, then obviously there's going to be a problem, and the poor child in the middle is going to be the one that's going to be disadvantaged. Boards of management need to understand what teachers want and what parents want, and I think all these stakeholders need to work together. Just by working together, you can produce or develop or grow something absolutely phenomenal. But sadly, in our systems, and if you listen to what happens at most Muslim schools, there's always the sense of conflict between either boards of management and the school, or parents and the school. So I think a lot of reflection needs to happen, and people need to understand the importance of working together.
How do you think that your dear late father, Billy Mutara, would respond to what you've just said to us now? Because I know he's had a huge impact on your life and lots of other lives around the country, particularly Rustenburg.
I wish he was alive to see what is happening in education today, because whatever is happening is what he said almost 5 or 6 years ago. So yeah, I think just to take what is left behind and to grow and develop that, and to serve, to make a difference wherever I am, to use his example and just to serve.
And no doubt, I think all of his children, your brother Riaz as well, who was a guest on the show a little while ago, all of his children have done him proud, have they not?
Alhamdulillah, yes. And we will continue to do so.
It's been delightful having you in the studio. That's all we have time for. Have a wonderful stay in South Africa. And inshallah, the next time you come through to South Africa, we want to hear some more from you about education in the 21st century and around the globe. So thank you so much for your thoughts.
Jazakallah. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure entirely. The lovely Nadia Mutara talking to us about the changing face of education, not only here back home, but all around the world. Still to come on the show, our final interview for the morning. We're going to be joined by Ziad Dadebai to talk about motivation and relationships, inshallah. Welcome back to the final interview of the morning. I'm very pleased to announce the presence of Ziad Dadebai. I've heard some great things about him, and I've been told that whatever you throw at him, you'll get a response and you'll get a wonderful insight into the subject matter at hand. So I was sitting and wondering, what on earth am I going to talk to him about? Relationships, motivation, and even Islam. Alhamdulillah, he is Hafiz al-Quran, and he's not Hafiz al-Quran, but he has a deep knowledge of Islam, and he also talks about quantum physics and the relationship to Islam, and just Islam encompassing absolutely every facet of life. So let's start with motivation, and let's see where and how you can be motivated but still bring in the Islamic aspect. Assalamu alaikum, welcome.
Salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Maaf, I thought you were Hafiz al-Quran.
No.
You just have a very deep love for the deen, obviously.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
Ziad, you're a family man, and you run the family business, and you, alhamdulillah, run a very successful business at that. Where do you find time? I understand that you work very closely and you work a lot with young people. Where do you find the time to do that?
Well, I mean, alhamdulillah, first of all, business takes a lot of my time. But as Muslims, first of all, as human beings, we have to find time for the more important things in life. It's not only about business. In fact, if we're talking about motivation, part of the problem with motivation in the world today is that it's all been incentivized economically. And this is what has sabotaged morality also. And so what we need to do is to have an understanding of Islam, first of all, and see how it can motivate us as Muslims and the people we come into contact with into living more meaningful and beneficial lives, so that we're not only focusing on business, for example, but finding time to do other more important contributions to life in general and humanity at large.
When we talk motivation, often when you see young people that don't seem to have any direction, or when you work with a young couple, I know that you're very big on building relationships as well. And all this is based on the foundation, obviously, and motivation. You must be motivated enough to invest in that relationship or that concept. But when we talk motivation, what do we mean? And you know, I'm sure you are aware that in the corporate world, when they try to motivate their staff, it's always done through financially, or because, you know, they attach some monetary value to it. And I've often been told that you can't be motivated by money. So what is motivation? Where does it come from? And if I want to motivate myself to achieve something great or small, how do I find that thing called motivation to get me going?
Well, there's two things. I mean, first of all, to remind yourself or to remember is that when we desiring something, which is what we call motivation, is a desire to achieve an outcome. You know, outcomes are usually a result of processes. You don't just make a change overnight. It's about changing small parts of your habits, which in turn allow you to achieve the outcome. You know, that's the one important thing. The other thing about motivation is that because of the incentivizing, as you're talking, what happens is people become more focused on an extrinsic form of
rather than intrinsic.
And what studies have shown is that intrinsic motivation is far more self-sustaining, it's far more powerful and lasting, and it's more fulfilling. Now, extrinsic motivation would take the form of wealth, for example, praise, people looking for praise, which is something with the social media today, competition, you know, and this is why we're always competing and comparing with each other. And this is whether you're in business, whether you're in relationships, you know, whether it's children at school, the competition affects us. And then the other thing that affects us is either, or motivates us, is the fear of losing something, or the fear of some eventuality happening to us. So we're driven either by something positive, a positive stimulus, which could be wealth, fame, and competition, or by something, the fear of something. So we're driven by hope and by fear. And it's amazing that in the Deen, our scholars say that Iman, faith, is between hope and fear.
Right.
Now, when we look at motivation, for example, all our cues come from Western education or Western professionals, basically. And what they've done in the last 50 years or so is try to incentivize everything. And what they're beginning to discover, that in doing that, they've actually sabotaged humanity. So let me give you an example. There's a man called George Loewenstein.
Can I ask you to hold that thought? Let's take a call, but I also want to explore the age of instant gratification as well. But we'll leave that for after the break, but let's take our first call.
Okay.
Amina, assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Appa Julie, and assalamu alaikum to the guest as well.
Wa alaikum salam wa
Appa,
rahmatullahi.
I think motivation and inspiration actually goes together. Because when we inspire people to motivate, like once I actually broke my foot, I had a seizure and I broke my foot. I had to wait 20 minutes for the cast to set. And I got onto a wheelchair, but the wheelchair wasn't rolling nicely. And I heard a voice saying, "Where do you need to go?" It actually was a female doctor, and she pushed me to the pharmacy. But it happens like when I see somebody at the hospital and they are in need, I actually try and help them to the best of my ability. And that is just to inspire people to do the same. And if they can help others, and if they are in times of need, Allah will put someone in the most inspired way that you would never actually think, unexpected ways.
Okay, great thought. Shukran very much indeed.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Okay, she brings up a great point. She talks inspiration and motivation.
Okay, well, this is something I wanted to talk about in motivation, because this is a concept in our religion called ihsan.
Right.
Now, ihsan is the central concept of our religion. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, He says, الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. That Allah created life and death in order to test the ihsan in your actions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. That indeed you have in the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam the example of ihsan. Now, what is ihsan? Ihsan in Arabic comes from the word hasana, which means to do something beautiful and to do something excellently. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, He says, الَّذِي أَحْسَنَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقَ. That Allah has created everything with ihsan. So when you look at the Discovery Channel, for example, and you admire the beauty you see, you know, whether it's in the animal kingdom or in nature, that's the ihsan Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has infused into that action. But for us now, coming back to the motivation part, is that when we monetize something, okay, we may be striving for the excellence. So take a doctor, for example. He wants to be the best in his field, so he's excelling. But many times, in the pursuit of that excellence, he forgets his humanity, he forgets the beauty. So that man would not be a muhsin, he would not be a doctor of ihsan. When he is practicing his profession well, and he's treating the people beautifully with humanity, then you call him a doctor of ihsan. In fact, what they found in studies is that oncologists, for example, and why I'm using this is because they're dealing with people at the most vulnerable stages of their life. So you would expect
and possibly the end stages of their lives as well.
You would expect the most compassion and mercy to be demonstrated by a human being in that position. But what they found is that oncologists that have been incentivized by pharmaceutical companies will overprescribe chemotherapy. Now imagine chemotherapy is one of the worst things you can undergo because of all the disastrous effects on the body. But they will overprescribe chemotherapy if it's tied to an incentive, you know, for how much they administer. So what happens is this man is good in his field, but his humanity is corrupted by the incentive. Now in Islam, we're motivated by this understanding that all our actions should be excellent and should be beautiful. Now why? First of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَحْسِنُوا, behave beautifully and excellently. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ, because Allah loves the people of ihsan. But more importantly now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us 1400 years ago, He said, إِنْ أَحْسَنْتُمْ, if you behave beautifully and excellently, أَحْسَنْتُمْ لِأَنفُسِكُمْ, you do it for your own benefit. Now what modern science is beginning to discover is that positive actions and positive emotions are beneficial for our body. This is what the Quran said.
Yes.
1400 years ago.
And science is only
science is now saying,
now.
So like the lady said, if she goes to the hospital and she wants to inspire someone and she pushes the wheelchair, for example, what she doesn't realize is two things are happening, because science is now discovering when you just assist someone, first of all, your body produces oxytocin, which is something which it's called a love hormone, because it brings people together.
The feel-good hormone.
Okay? Your body produces serotonin, which is the happiness molecule. It lifts your mood. It produces dopamine, which is the reward molecule, which gives you a sense of fulfillment.
Right.
Your body releases endorphins, which are your natural painkillers, which make you feel less pain.
Sure.
Okay? So this is the thing now about beauty, is that what we're beginning to discover is that when we do it, first of all, it's good for us. But what they're finding is that that same effect is happening in the person who's experiencing the positiveness of your actions. And when we behave negatively, for example, then your body produces cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, which is disastrous.
Like
for
people
the body.
who can't manage the anger. Just imagine what's going on with them.
So anger, for example, is like a zoom on a camera, right?
Yeah.
It narrows you in. And that's all you can see. This is why it becomes easy for people to become abusive, to become violent, for husbands to utter talaq and then regret later.
Right.
So ihsan, what ihsan is, so if you take negative emotions, it's like zooming in, you know, on a camera. Ihsan, on the other hand, is like zooming out. When you zoom out, you widen your perspective. So many more options become available to you. Now, this is the point I wanted to make to you about Islam, is that traditionally you have Muslims fall into two groups. One that feels that Islam is something to do with the spiritual and doesn't really have any effect on what happens in the world. And then you get some Muslims that feel that Islam has no answer to the solutions of the modern world. Okay? But when we look at this deen of Islam and we find this convergence of neuroscience and biopsychology, what we're finding is that this system that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us is a system of excellence. It is a test, but the test is a benefit for us.
To mankind.
Okay.
Hold that thought.
Yeah.
I'm talking to Ziad Dadaba, and you can see why I thought he's Hafiz al-Quran, because he has such deep knowledge and understanding of the deen. Alhamdulillah. May he continue going on touching lives in a positive way. And we still have him for a few minutes more. Let's take an ad break. When we get back, we'll continue talking motivation, ihsan, inspiration, and all of those amazing things that just uplifts our spirits. And if you want to become a part of the conversation, do call in on the open line. And we're into the final segment of the show this morning. We're talking to Ziad Dadaba, we're talking motivation, we're talking inspiration, we're talking about instant gratification, very especially with the young people in our lives. Ziad, how do you respond to that?
To the part of instant gratification?
Yes, that's a huge problem, is it not?
Yes.
Because we give our children too much too soon, and they go through life not appreciating the finer things in life, and they just want more, and caught into the whole issue of consumerism, brand consciousness, bigger, better, flashier.
Well, we come back to this topic of ihsan. That first of all, children learn, okay, from their parents.
By example.
Now, human beings mimic by nature. We have things in our brain called mirror neurons. When you see someone smiling, it's very difficult to not smile back, for example. They do experiments with children, for example. They put a child in a room with his parent. They get a researcher to come in, and then the parent talks to the researcher in a polite manner in the first instance, and then in a bit of an abrupt manner in the second instance. It means a second researcher comes in. And what they then do is ask the parent to leave the room. And then the researcher comes in and interacts with the child. And the child interacts with the researcher with the exact same attitude that they witnessed the parent interacting with them. So that's the first important thing, is that children get their values in life from us. If we're behaving with ihsan, if we're teaching or treating people beautifully, whether it's the maid or your staff or your patient
or your spouse for that
your
matter.
spouse, this is the first thing that's going to rub off on your children. If you're making time for your children, because there is no substitute for time, okay? When you don't make the time, now you need to substitute that with something. And this is where all the financial reward comes in. So we're starting to give the children.
You console yourself as a parent by saying that because I've gone out to work, I want to give my child a better quality of life, but at what cost?
Yes. And this is the big misunderstanding, all right? If we just come to our first point, is that all the smaller things we've been asked to do, those are actually the important things in life. This is what your body needs. If you know, they say we compromise our health in pursuit of wealth. And then we try to use the wealth to buy back the health.
Oh, absolutely.
But that doesn't work. So first of all, we as parents have to understand this concept of ihsan, of pursuing everything with beauty and excellence, because it's beneficial for our own bodies. And it can't be compensated by wealth. Then we have to take that same understanding and bring it into our homes. And we have to understand that there is no substitute for ihsan and time with our children. Now, we often trying to buy them off. And so we're giving them these tools. You're giving them phones and we're giving them iPads. And what we don't realize is that anything that gives you instant gratification, it's tying into what they call your dopamine circuitry in your brain. Okay? And the way the dopamine circuitry works is that you need a higher stimulation each time, just like a drug addict.
Absolutely.
He needs a higher dose. And so we're getting our children dependent on all of these instruments.
We're making little addicts out of them.
Which, first of all, robbing them of their morality, of their modesty, okay? It's robbing them of kindness and
Of
compassion.
their innocence.
Yes. And it's literally stripping ihsan away from them. And so the real solution for that, you know, there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he's talking about the end of time. And he says, one of the things he says, أَنْتَلِدَ الْأَمَةُ رَبَّتَهَا. When you see a woman, a slave woman, giving birth to her master. Okay? Now, just before this, Jibreel asked the Prophet ﷺ, وَمَا الْإِحْسَانِ? What is ihsan? And then Jibreel, the Prophet ﷺ answers, he says, ihsan is that you worship Allah as if you see Him. Because if He doesn't, or if you don't see Him, rather Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees you. Now, the understanding we get from this is that every single act we carry out should be carried out as though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing us, watching us.
He's watching us.
But every single action should be an act of worship. Now let's just get back to this part about the Prophet ﷺ saying that a woman will give birth to her slave master. One of the meanings is that children in later life will not look after their parents. They will treat the parents like the parents are their servants.
Or alternatively,
Okay.
they're a burden.
Or a burden, okay? Now, if you look at the relationship with ihsan before this and now this issue, it's almost as if the parents don't teach the children ihsan when they're young, if those children don't witness ihsan in the parents, then when the parents get older, that absence of ihsan will come back to afflict them. So really, when we're talking of the instant gratification, we have to attach a visual image. This is one of the wisdoms of ihsan. Attach a visual image to every single act. Is it beautiful or is it ugly? It becomes like a fatwa on its own. Because you can picture someone helping an old lady over the road. Is it beautiful or is it ugly? You can picture someone giving their child a phone. And if you understand that phone is affecting their brain, it's affecting the heart, it's affecting the entire body. We're
And
just
what
talking
is
of
exposing them to.
physiologically, first of all, it's harming your child. Now, if you as a parent can give that to your child in spite of the fact that you know it's physically harmful, what kind of image does that create in your mind about that parent? But then more importantly is what is that phone or that iPad or whatever it is exposing the child to? You're getting involved with all the negativity, with all the evil that exists in the world. Now, attach an image to that. I try to understand why parents will do that
And
to
they
their
justify
children.
it by saying that this way we know our child is safe. If he or she needs to get in touch with us, we're just a click away. But I think that's where it stops. They don't realize the other ramifications of giving the child the phone. Just what you're opening your child up to by giving him that device.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, so we as Muslims, when we come to ihsan, we're weighing everything.
Right.
And the one far outweighs the other. You know, so you can't use this as a
An argument,
justification.
sure.
You know, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He talks of alcohol, for example, He says, in it is benefit, but the harms far outweigh the benefit. And this is why we don't come close to it. And so we have to bring the same understanding into our daily practice.
Let's wrap up now by coming right back to motivation.
Okay.
And you've spoken about ihsan long and hard. Let's understand how we now introduce this concept into our lives if we are not that way inclined and the lives of our loved ones.
Well, look, in terms of motivation, when you look at motivational theory, they say you need 3 R's. You need reminders, like a trigger that will remind you to do the action. And then you need a routine, that means the action itself. And then you have to keep the reward in mind. What scientific research has found is, well, let me give you a physical example. There was a study done with 248 participants. They were broken down into 3 groups. The first group was told to record their exercise habits for a week. They were given some material to read, unrelated, okay, and they were set off. The second group were also told to monitor their exercise habits, and they were given a pamphlet explaining the benefits of exercising on your health. Okay? And the third group was also given the task to record the exercising, given the pamphlet, but they had to write down on a piece of paper, I will exercise for 20 minutes on, and the day, the time, and the place. And what they found, the first group, 38% of them exercised at least once the first week. In the second group that understood the benefits, okay, they exercised 35%. But the third group, the ones that had a fixed routine to move into, that stated the day, stated the place, and for how long, 91% of them exercise. So what we need an implementable plan.
And
this
if
is
you,
tied to motivation,
if you have a plan, a concrete plan, that already kickstarts motivation. You are motivated.
Yes, and what they're finding is that motivation is actually driven by action. It's because they say your thoughts, okay, lead to behavior. Behavior leads to performance, and performance to thoughts. So now you like in a system that's driving itself. Now, when we come to the Quran and the Sunnah, for example, it is already that implementable plan. This is the power. So if you understand the effects of positivity and negativity on the body, if you understand how food affects your body, then we go to the Sunnah and you look at what's the Sunnah telling us. It's saying don't become angry. Why? It causes havoc in your body. It's saying smile more often. Why? Because it's good for you. It's saying help and interact well with other people. Why? Because it's good for you. If you take prayer, for example, there's a new thing in science, it's called mind-body intervention. They're finding that if a person does body movements, for example, with meditation, is one of the most powerful things that you can do for your body.
And the most powerful exercises. And unfortunately, that's where we have to leave it. Okay. We've run out of time. Fascinating talking to you. I could be sitting here talking all day long, but inshallah we'll have you back in studio. So just very quickly, motivation, your final thought.
Well, I want first myself and everyone else to start working on making every thought, every word and every action an action of beauty and of excellence, inshallah.
Inshallah, Ameen. And don't forget the positivity. Positive thoughts produce positive outcomes, and alhamdulillah, with positive outcomes around you, everybody is in a very, very good space, inshallah. That's all we have time for, and inshallah, don't forget we can get together again on Saturday morning at the same time. A very big thank you to the Let's Talk team, and as always, Khuda Hafiz from me, Julie Alli.
يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا 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 هلا